through developing innovative programs on software testing and quality for the tech community, leadership, and educational institutions. Testmasters Online is our new educational project. It includes the series of free webinars, Ask the Expert roundtables with the renowned speakers in our testing community. It offers new ideas, knowledge, and opportunity to chat and network with software testers around the world. Our other project is Software Testing Conference Contest NYC, taking place November 14th to 16th in New York. And we invite you to discover emergent trends and practices in software testing and quality engineering. Lay your hands and eyes on latest technologies and immerse yourself into the thought leadership of others in three unforgettable days at the Contest NYC. Our presenters are senior technologists, managers, and practitioners who are the innovators and experts in their field. The conference is being held, as mentioned, November 14th to 16th, 2018 in New York, and the link to register is in Testmasters Academy Slack channel. Today's webinar is Not Just That with Damian Synadinos. Damian will host an inspirational talk about our personal and professional identities and how they affect our lives. I'll leave it to Damian to continue.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, Alima. I appreciate it. One note, it's called More Than That, but actually Not Just That is probably an appropriate title as well. So thank you very much to Anna Roisman, the Testmasters Academy, for letting me be a part of this online series, and all the attendees for your time today. So let's dive in. I assume that most of you have probably read the abstract, but in case you haven't, in summary, I'm going to be talking a little bit about unjusting yourself, and I'm going to be examining labels. What are labels exactly? What labels do we put on ourselves? What do they mean? What are the benefits and disadvantages of different labels? In the second half, I'll be looking at, I'll also be talking about anxiety a little bit, how to, what it is and how to approach it. In the second half, I'll be talking about rediscovering who you are right now, your as is. And I'll also be looking at to be, who you can be as you continue to develop and grow. Now, a couple caveats and notes. This original talk was developed and designed to be a keynote, and it was highly interactive. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible as a webinar, so there's been large sections of this removed. That said, the subject matter of this talk is very applicable to a lot of different contexts and people. But Anna, for this Testmasters Academy webinar, has asked me to correlate it specifically to testers, so I've actually added some content to it for today. And as Anna said in a recent promotional tweet, some software testing webinars are technical. This one is not. This one is not technical. It is not instructional. Instead, it's designed to inspire, to motivate, to encourage. I hope that what I say today will inspire you to realize that you are more than that. You're more than any one thing, any one label that you might have on yourself. I hope it will motivate you to think about your current and true value and what your true worth is. And I hope it will encourage you to develop your potential value, to find areas where you can grow and learn and find out how you can be of value in ways that you didn't think were possible. So before I get into the actual presentation, I'd like to start with a little bit about me, a little bit about my career, and a story that kind of inspired this particular talk. So I started testing in 1993. That's 25 years ago. I started at CompuServe when I was 19 years old. I dropped out of college. And for the next 25 years, I spent doing software testing. I've been at about 15 or 16 companies all around Central Ohio, where I live now. I've been in large companies of 30 or 40,000 people, small companies of 30 or 40 people. I've done full-time work, part-time work, consulting work. I've worked with onshore and offshore teams. I've worked in a lot of different methodologies and approaches to doing software development, software testing. I've used a variety of tools. I used automation to assist my testing. Filled a lot of different roles from contributor to manager. Currently, I help host my own, help organize a QA or the Highway testing conference here in Columbus, Ohio. I also mentor and coach testers around the world. And so I have quite a storied and experienced testing career. And if you look at my resume or my CV, you may get the impression that I am a tester. And indeed, that's what I've done for most of my career. So there's a consultancy in Columbus, I'll promote them, HMB, who I've worked with in the past, and they know not only what I do, what I do is professionally, but who I am. They know what I'm capable of, the different attributes, knowledge, and skills that I possess. And so sometimes when they see an interesting opportunity, they'll pass it my way. And they called me in mid-2017 with an opportunity, and they said, hey, we have a client, commercial realty, and they're interested in someone. Do you mind if we send your resume in? I said, well, tell me a little bit about the opportunity. They said, commercial realty company recently merged with another company, so there's a big clash of cultures and processes and people, and there's a lot of turmoil resulting from this. So they're looking for a small team of people to come in and help analyze their business processes, how they actually do business, and help look at those processes and improve those processes, and at the same time document all the different things that they do, how they run their business. I said, sure, yeah, why not? Send my resume to them, we'll see what happens. So a few days later, the hiring manager called me, and he said, hey, Damian, I've had a chance to look at your resume. I went out to your website, I looked at your career, I read some blog posts of yours. I liked everything I saw, but I have a concern and a question. My question is, do you think that you can do this job? And my concern is, it looks to me, based on your resume, that you're just a tester. So when he said that, the word just a tester, those words just hung in the air for a moment. Now, it made me feel uneasy, a little bit inadequate, and I'm very proud of being a tester. I'm proud of my career. I'm proud of the things I've accomplished and done. But the way it was phrased made me really feel uneasy. And so I paused for a moment and thought about his question, and I responded like this. I said, well, what if I told you that for the duration of my career, I've been learning and developing and honing and refining certain attributes, knowledge, and skills, things like process analysis, looking at processes, the way that they work, figuring out how things are done, and improving those processes, finding inefficiencies, gaps, and holes, and making those processes better. And I've also been doing process documentation, taking a process and writing down the nuts and bolts of how it works so they can be distributed to others for various reasons. I said, but I've been doing those things in a testing context. I've been doing test process analysis, test process improvement, test process documentation. For 25 years, I've been doing those things. So as I understand it, all you're really asking me to do is to change the context from testing to commercial realty. And so therefore, the answer to your question is I do think that I can do the job. I think I have what it takes. Well, he liked the answer, and I ended up getting the job. And it was a very successful, in my opinion, project. It went very well. That's the epilogue to the story. But I tell this story for a few reasons. Number one, it inspired this very talk, more than that. But also because I'll keep returning to this story over and over, because there's a lot of parts in the story that are relevant to the things I'm going to talk about today. So when he said you're just a tester, what he was doing was labeling me. So let's talk about labels. Perhaps you've seen this label. Hello, you've seen it at networking events and different conferences perhaps, and you fill it out and you put it on your jacket or your shirt. Maybe you fill it out, looks like something like this. You put your name on it, maybe your current job title and current company. This is a pretty typical label. Here's what mine might look like. Damian Synadinos, I'm a speaker with Ineffable Solutions. That's certainly what I do, but it's not who I am. In fact, I'm a lot of other things. As I just mentioned, I'm also a tester. I've been testing for 25 years, so that's part of who I am. I'm also a mentor. I mentioned that I mentor people around the world and coach them and offer advice based on experience. I'm a conference organizer. I mentioned that I help organize the QA or the Highway Conference. Call for speakers is open. Submit today. I'm an artist. I've been drawing since I was a child. I don't get to do much artwork anymore, except for I design and draw my own slides, and I draw for family members for fun. I'm an improviser. I have over 10 years of improv experience. Whose line is it anyway? Doing that type of thing on stage. Spontaneous creation and performance of a show. That got me into acting. Many people in the improv are also in theater, and some of them cast me in some plays. And from that, I became a playwright. I wrote my own play that was produced in Columbus, in New York, and Chicago. And I'm also a son, like some of us are. I'm a brother, like many of us are. I'm a husband. I was married about 12 years ago. And to be fair, it's probably more accurate to say I'm a divorcee. Unfortunately, that didn't work out so well. But the good news is I'm a husband again. I got married again. This time it worked. That led me to be a father twice over. Alina, my daughter, is 7. Zachary is 5. I'm also a golfer. I'm a bowler, although it might be more accurate to say I'm a person that golfs and a person that bowls. I'm not very good at either. I'm a rounder. That's just a fancy word for someone that plays poker. I've been playing poker for about 20 years. I'm a gamer. I started on a TRS-80 color computer and have been through many, many different systems, and I still game today. I'm confident. I feel very confident right now. I feel confident when I'm speaking. I'm also very nervous right now. I also am very nervous, as all speakers should be to some degree when they're speaking. I'm an ambivert. That's somebody that has characteristics of both extroverts and introverts. I display both characteristics. I'm curious. I think that that's a very important quality for being a tester and indeed a human as well. I'm passionate. I hope you get that already. I'm funny. I'm dependable. At least I like to think I am, although maybe you have to decide that for yourself. And probably about now you're thinking I'm rather self-absorbed. And sometimes people can put labels on you that you have no control over. Now, the point of this is not that I am self-absorbed. The point of this is that any one of these labels by itself is absolutely true. It does describe some aspect, some element of who I am. But any one label by itself does not describe all that I am. It's just one small part. So while I am Damian Synadinos, a speaker with Ineffable Solutions, that's what I do, but it's not who I am. Now, this also reminds me of a parable that you might be familiar with. It's the parable of the blind men and the elephant. If you're unfamiliar with it, this is roughly how it goes. There's an elephant, and there's these 6 blind men, and they've never encountered an elephant. They've obviously never seen an elephant. And so they encounter an elephant for the first time, and each one of them begins to touch the elephant in different parts of the body. And one touches the trunk, and another touches the leg, and one touches the ear and the side and the tail. And afterwards, they collect back together, and they say, so what exactly is an elephant? And the man that touched the trunk says, well, an elephant is very much like a snake. And another guy says, no, you're wrong. The man that touched the tail says, an elephant is like a rope, you see. And another one says, no, I touched the leg, and an elephant is like a tree trunk. And another says it's like a wall, and another that touched the tusk says it's like a spear. Now, none of these gentlemen were wrong. In fact, each one of them was correct, but they were not holistically correct. Each one of them was only examining and understanding one particular aspect of an elephant. So this particular parable, an old Indian parable, reminds me of another story that comes from my personal life. As I said, I like to draw pictures for relatives, sometimes for fun. And so one of my nephews, Peter, came to me one day and said, Uncle Damian, will you draw me a picture? And I said, sure, Peter, what would you like? And he said, well, I think I'd like you to draw me a robot. I said, all right, I can draw you a robot, Peter. And he said, wait, no, I've changed my mind. I'd like a pirate, please. Can you draw me a pirate? I said, all right, I'll draw you a pirate, Peter. He said, no, I like pigs better. Can you draw me a pig? I said, all right, I'll draw you a pig. No. Actually, I do want a robot. I changed my mind back. And he said, no, I kind of want a pirate. No, I want a pig. And he kept changing his mind. I want a robot. I want a pirate, a pig. And this is what young nephews do. Sometimes they're indecisive. I finally said, stop. And this is what I drew him. I drew him a robot pirate pig. Well, he liked the photo, or the drawing, and it's still on his wall somewhere. But I like this story because it kind of gives insight into the different aspects that we can be simultaneously. When I look in a mirror, do I see myself as just a tester, as just a father, as just a gamer, as just confident or nervous? Or do I see myself as a robot pirate pig? Do I see myself as many things all at once, giving me a more holistic view of all that I am? Now, all of this leads to one of my favorite quotes about labels, the labels that we put on ourselves and the labels that others put on us. It comes from Søren Kierkegaard, existentialist philosopher, Danish philosopher, 1800s. And one of the quotes is a favorite of mine. He said, once you label me, you negate me. Now, certainly when he thought of these words, he said them for some reason. My interpretation, what it means to me is that labels, the words we use to label ourselves and others, explicitly give, but they also implicitly take. In other words, a label may explicitly give. If I say I am a tester, I'm explicitly telling people that I am this thing, but it might imply that I'm not some other thing. It might, if I say I am a tester, it might imply that I'm not a developer, which might not be true. Sometimes it is true. If I say I am a Democrat, maybe it does mean that I'm also implied not a Republican. But sometimes it's not true. You can be multiple things at once, but sometimes labels can restrict. Now, they're necessary. Labels are very necessary. Every word I'm saying right now is a label. Words are just representations of larger ideas. That's why dictionaries exist. Labels help us identify things, describe things, categorize, classify. Labels are absolutely necessary, and they're very helpful. But they can also be harmful. They can be restricting and limiting. They can develop unfair stereotypes. Labels can be restricting and harmful if they're used inappropriately. There's nothing inherently wrong with labels. It depends on how they're used, the intent, the purpose behind a label. So I ask, how do you label yourself? What labels do you put on yourself? Are they fair? Are they unfair? When you label yourself or you label others, you're explicitly saying something about yourself or another person, but are you implicitly taking away, making assumptions about them that may not be true? Now, I said that all words are labels. There's one word that's particularly devious as a label. The word is just. Now, it's the 57th most common word. In 2011, they did a study of the Oxford English corpus, over 2 billion words in the English language, and they found that the word just was the 57th most common word. Now, maybe that is because it's a very versatile word. It can be used to mean a lot of different things. For example, just as an adjective can mean morally right, good, or fair. It is a just decision. As an adverb, it might mean nearby. It is just over there. Recently, it could mean I just saw it. I recently saw this. It can mean precisely or exactly. It was just what I needed. It can mean quite very rarely as emphasis. It was just wonderful. It can mean possibly or perhaps to express a possibility. It just might help. Another definition of just Another meaning of just can be only, simply, merely. It was just okay. And that's the one I want to focus on. Back to the story I told at the beginning. When that hiring manager called me on the phone, he says, according to your resume, it looks to me like you're just a tester. He was using the meaning of just that was only, simply, merely. And that was restricting, it was limiting, and it made me feel uneasy. So that was the intent of that word just in that sentence. And what did it cause? It caused me anxiety. Now, I'm sure that many of us have felt scared or afraid. I would ask you to ask yourself, have you ever felt scared or afraid? And all of us have. And if you say that you haven't, I would wager that you're probably afraid to admit that you have. But to be fair, I'm using the words scared and afraid and anxiety all interchangeably when that's not really fair. There is a meaningful difference. Being scared or afraid is about certainty. It's about a known, real, imminent, actual, objective, definite threat. Anxiety, Oxford English Dictionary offers two definitions. The first one is it's worrying about something with an uncertain outcome. Anxiety is all about uncertainty. So that was very meaningful to me when I read more about anxiety and understood what these definitions meant. If I feel like I'm anxious, sometimes the emergency alert, sorry. Sometimes if I'm feeling anxious, it can have the same symptoms as feeling scared or afraid. Sweaty palms, sweating, nervous, maybe shaking. So the outward symptoms of anxiety and fear can be the same, but there is a meaningful difference. I might be scared or afraid if I see a bear down the trail, but I might feel anxious before I take the hike if I think there might be a bear, but I'm not certain there might be, I'm uncertain, and therefore I may feel anxious. So recognizing the difference between fear and anxiety was meaningful. Sometimes when I start to shake and get sweaty, I ask myself, is this a real imminent danger, or is it something that may or may not happen? Another interesting definition of anxiety is desire for something to happen or to do something. Now, this is interesting if you compare it against the first definition of anxiety. The first one is worrying about something, while the second one is desire for something. It almost seems paradoxical that you can worry about something and it causes anxiety, and at the same time, you can desire, you can want something, and it might result in the same feelings of anxiety. Now, I'm not the first to consider these dual kind of paradoxical meanings of anxiety. Back to Soren Kierkegaard, he called anxiety the dizziness of freedom. He said it's a paralyzing possibility, the boundlessness of one's own existence. And he likened it to standing on the edge of a high building or a cliff and looking into the boundlessness of your own possibilities. Jean-Paul Sartre, another existentialist philosopher, said, when you realize that you can or must define yourself, to label yourself, and you realize and accept that you have total freedom, it can make you feel dizzy. So anxiety can be pretty daunting. It can be pretty intimidating when you start to feel anxious. However, Soren Kierkegaard offers some suggestions to help. He goes on to say, for those that understand uncertainty, the uncertainty of anxiety, anxiety can become a serving spirit that against its will leads you where you wish to go. So while anxiety can seem daunting and paralyzing, if you also realize that it's about uncertainty and it's about paradoxically desire for something, you can either run from it where it's destructive, or it can be generative. You can go towards that thing. Back to the story I told at the beginning. When he offered me the job, he said, all right, I like your answer, you have the job. That didn't lessen my anxiety. My anxiety stayed the same or even increased because I had these thoughts. What if he's right? What if I am just a tester? Am I more than that? I'm not sure. But when I thought about the definition of anxiety, I realized, well, something might go wrong. Maybe he's right, but maybe he's wrong. Maybe I am more than that. Maybe I will succeed at this job. I'm not afraid of it. I just have anxiety over it. And instead of fleeing from the opportunity, I went towards the opportunity. And as I said, the epilogue, I thought it was a success. Now, if I had succumbed to the anxiety and gone the other way, I might have never had that experience, and this talk might not exist. Now, there's a lot of people that recommend facing your fears or facing your anxiety. More recently, Kent Beck, the developer or creator of extreme programming. He has a blog post he did recently called Publish Everything, in parentheses, pretty much. And in it, he talks about the times I've avoided publishing, it has been because of fear of rejection or fear of judgment. He says, if I had listened to my fears, I would have missed out on getting a significant message to my readers. Now, I like this idea. I wish he would have used the word anxiety instead of fear, because really, he didn't have fear of rejection or fear of judgment. He didn't know that he would be rejected if he posted his thoughts online. He had anxiety that he might be rejected. But the thought is still true. Many, many people in many different contexts encourage you to face your anxiety, to not let it be destructive, but to let it be generative. Now, some of you may be listening online right now and saying, well, listen, I'm already 22 years old. I already know who I am. I don't need to relabel myself. I'm fine. Or some of you may be listening and saying, I'm already 62 years old. It's far too late for me to start considering labeling myself and figuring out who I am and who I can be. And to you, I would say, is it really too late to start? This is an infographic by Ana Vital from Adioma. It's an infographic company. I know it's too small to read, but I encourage you to look up this interactive infographic because it's fascinating. What they did is they looked at the top 100 founders on the Forbes World's Largest Companies list. And they looked at the founders, their biographies, their demographics, their background, and they understood at what age they made this decision to start a company. Now, this particular chart is trying to challenge the societal expectations about success. Some people say, well, if you're past a certain age, it's hard or impossible to be successful. So this chart is attempting to show that that might not be the case. Sam Walton was 44 years old when he founded Walmart. So it's trying to show that at any age, it's never too late to start. The reason I included this infographic is for another reason. Something I take away from it is not only these people, some of these people founded companies late in life, but there's a good chance that as they were considering the idea of founding these large companies, that they might have had anxiety. And rather than running from the anxiety, they went towards it. I'm sure that Sam Walton had some degree of anxiety when he decided to found Walmart, but instead of fleeing from it, he went towards it and developed Walmart. So what does that mean? So what? This is an important question. This is the why question. Why does any of this matter? I'm not talking about this stuff today to suggest that you stop testing, that you quit your career. I'm talking about this to inspire, to encourage, to motivate, and make you think about the labels you use. I'm talking about unjusting yourself, considering the labels that you put on yourself that others may put on you. What do they explicitly give? What do they say about you? And what do they imply about you? What assumptions might they mean? Don't forget to use anxiety to your benefit. Anxiety is about uncertainty. And don't flee from it, but understand that you can go towards anxiety because it also represents a desire for something. And remember, it's never too late to wait. It's never too late to start relabeling yourself, but still, don't wait. Take the time now to relabel yourself. Remember that you are more than that. So, now what? Who cares? Maybe you're on board so far and you say, all right, I buy the idea that labels are important and understanding the labels that we use can help define us, and we need to see ourselves holistically as robot pirate pigs. And I understand all that, but what am I supposed to do about it? As I said before, this is a not technical, non-instructional talk. It's intended to be inspirational and motivational. And that said, I'll still provide some suggestions on what you might do. Now I'm going to go to the second part, which is rediscovering who you are, figuring out who you are right now, as is, connecting the different dots and figuring out who you can be as you grow and develop. So there's a lot of different ways that people use to model the different things that you are. This is one particular model that I happen to like. I think it's a good model, so this is one I use. If you're going to try labeling yourself, thinking of all the things that make you you, you might divide it into three things. One is attributes. These are things that you are. Maybe you're reliable, curious, humble, dependable, passionate. Now, these are things that are inherent to who you are. They can be developed, but typically attributes are things that are more difficult to develop. You either are or not a curious person. Now, you can learn to be more curious, but it's typically very difficult to develop these types of inherent qualities, attributes, or traits. Another way that you might label yourself is according to knowledge. These are things that you know. Maybe you can fix an engine, or you can fly a kite, or you know how to juggle, or you know how to code Selenium or use Jira. These are different pieces of knowledge. These are also things that are typically easier to learn. Like it's harder to become more curious. It's not impossible, but harder, but it's probably easier to learn how to fix an engine or fly a kite. And finally, a third category might be skills. These are things that you do. Now, very often, this is just an applied attribute or applied knowledge. Maybe if you know how to fix an engine, you can say, I can fix an engine. It's something I can do. Or maybe if you know how to fly a kite, you can say, I can fly a kite. Or you know how to use Jira. You've read the manual. You've watched and observed others. And so you say, I can use Jira. There's a lot of gray area. Depending on how you phrase these things, you can sometimes classify one idea in any one of these. You might say, I have the knowledge of how to juggle. I know where to put my hands and where to throw the balls. So it's something I know. And therefore, since I know this, I can do that. I can juggle. And therefore, if someone asks you, what are you? It might be reasonable to say, I am a juggler. It's something that I am. Now, do these labels really, really matter? They don't, but what I'm proposing here is a model that might help you as you're analyzing and labeling yourself, you might use this model to help you think through it. Sometimes, depending on the context or purpose, you can figure out which labels are more or less important. For instance, is your height, ethnicity, gender, religion, all those things, are they important? Maybe or maybe not. I'll talk a little bit about how sometimes you don't recognize that some attribute, knowledge, or skill that you think is unimportant for some context might actually be very, very important, but you don't realize it yet. So I'll get to that in a moment. So this is kind of a word cloud I put together of various attributes and knowledge and skills. So I'd ask you to take a moment, look at these different words and terms, and I would assume that most people listening today are probably testers, since this is the Testmaster Academy. So I would ask you to look at this word cloud, look at these different terms, and think to yourself, are these things that are important to me as a tester? Is communication and documentation and critical thinking important as a tester? Do I need to do analysis and visual modeling? Do I need to cooperate as a tester? Well, perhaps surprising, what I did is I went on the internet and I searched for the essential qualities, the essential attributes, skills, and knowledge necessary to become a business analyst. And I found many, many answers, many blog posts, many articles, many white papers. And these that are on screen are some of the knowledge, skills, and attributes that floated to the top that were mentioned over and over and over again. In order to be a successful BA, you need to be honest. You need to be able to be self-reliant. You need to have time management skills and have empathy so you can deal with customers. Perhaps also surprising is I also searched for essential knowledge, skills, and attributes of an architect. And what do you know? It's the same list. Many of these same attributes, knowledge, and skills are also essential to being an architect. And guess what? They're also essential to becoming a plumber. Now, what I'm having here these are transferable attributes, knowledge, and skills. Of course, they're necessary to being a tester. And of course, to be a good tester, you also need to know very specific things. Maybe you do need to know how to use Jira or how to code in Selenium to be a tester in some particular context. And maybe those things are not important to being a plumber. Now, I'm not going to get into the detailed, granular things. I encourage you, if you're interested in those, to look up a talk by Fiona Charles called Multiplying the Odds. I first saw her deliver this at European Testing Conference in 2017. It's a very good talk, and she does go into detailed, granular types of attributes, knowledge, and skills that are necessary for a tester. But what I'm talking about today are transferable attributes, knowledge, and skills that can be moved from one context to another. These things are very important. They're core, they're fundamental to a lot of different contexts. Now, how do you model these? There's a lot of different ways that you can think about modeling a person. This is the T-shaped model. It came around in 1980s with McKinsey and Company, gained more popularity in 2001 with a Harvard Business Review article. They described a T-shaped manager. And the idea behind this model is that the crossbar of the T represents all the various things that we know, that we can do, that we are. And the vertical bar in the T represents that one thing that you're very, very good at. And this is a reasonable way to model a human being. You know a lot of things and you're good at one thing. However, in 2012, Ashley Friedland coined the phrase pie-shaped person. And they said, well, most people aren't good at one thing. And so representing them as a T probably isn't very accurate. Representing someone as a pie, the pie is the Greek letter, is more accurate. People are good at more than one thing. So the crossbar, again, is the breadth of knowledge, and the two verticals are the depth of knowledge. But as you keep adding more and more things, not many people are just good at two things. Many people are good at many things. And there's a lot of different words that people use to describe these types of folks. Generalized specialist or specialized generalist, a versatilist, a Renaissance person, a Johnny Do-It-All. There's a TED Talk by Emily Wapnick, and she calls these people multi-potentialites. I like that. But the visual that I'm using to represent this model reminded me of something. It reminded me of a comb. To me, this visual representation of a human is much better because each tooth in the comb represents some attribute, some knowledge, some skill that you have. But this metaphor is still broken, and it needs to be fixed by breaking the comb. In this metaphor, I think is very, very robust. If you think about a person as a broken comb, I think it accurately represents who they are. This particular metaphor came from Jared Spool in 2012 at a meetup in Chicago. And he said that each tooth in the comb, again, represents something that you are, some attribute, some knowledge, some skill. And the length of the tooth represents how capable, how adept you are at that thing. So maybe you're very empathetic and have a long tooth for empathy, but maybe you don't know much about fixing engines, so that's a very short tooth. Maybe you're very dependable, but not very curious. So everyone has different combs. Another person's comb may look like this, and another person may have strengths where you have weaknesses. So I like this particular metaphor because I think it's very accurate. It helps me better understand myself and better understand others. It also has another benefit. It can help me when I'm trying to develop a team. If I think about three different people and their various strengths and weaknesses, here was Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the comb for Huey, Dewey, and Louie. You might try to develop a team and say, well, I know that I want these attributes, these knowledge, and these skills. These are important and are going to be important in this context for this particular project. Do we have all the people on the team that have all those necessary things? And if you slide the combs together, very quickly, you can find gaps and holes in the team. You can say, well, we have one or more people that are good communicators, and that's important for this project. This project, we're going to be using this particular tool, but unfortunately, none of the people on our team have that knowledge. So we either need to train them or find someone that has a longer tooth in their particular comb for that particular tool. Now, there's different gradients and ways that you can use this. If you recognize that you have a short tooth in one area, you might want to develop it. How can you develop it? Let's talk about the 2B. Let's talk about connecting dots. This is, of course, Steve Jobs. He went to Reed College early in his life, and later on, you might not know this, but he founded Apple. Of course, you knew that. So he was giving a commencement address at Stanford in 2005, and part of the commencement address, he was talking about his college experience at Reed, and he was telling about how he took a calligraphy class, and he learned all the different ways to write and draw calligraphy. Well, then many, many years later, he founded Apple, and it turned out that this knowledge that he had gained in college about calligraphy, he realized was going to be very, very beneficial as he developed the Apple computer. It helped him develop the different serif and sans serif typesets, the different fonts, the spacing, the calligraphy, many of the different beautiful fonts. This is really the first personal computer that had wonderful fonts, and it led to part of the success of Apple computers. So Steve Jobs said in his commencement address, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. When he was young and in college, he probably didn't think that this calligraphy class will someday help me found the world's biggest computer company. He didn't have any idea how this knowledge that he was gaining might help him later in life, but it turns out it was important. So again, when you're thinking about the different teeth in your comb, the different labels you put on yourself, and you say, well, I am this thing, but how important is it? I would suggest you include that because it might be important in unexpected ways. Another way I like to express this idea is from a pop culture reference, and it comes from the movie Karate Kid. Now, I'm 44 years old, so when I hear Karate Kid, this is who I think of. Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso. There might be some younger people listening or watching, and you might think of Hilary Swank in the next Karate Kid, or Dre Parker in the Karate Kid remake. That's not the Karate Kid I'm talking about. I'm talking about Daniel LaRusso, the one true Karate Kid. So if you haven't seen the movie, there's a few key scenes in it that kind of exemplify this idea of transferable skills. And if you haven't seen it, here's how the scenes go. Daniel is in high school, and he's getting beat up by some local thugs. And he's had enough, so he goes to the wise and masterly Mr. Miyagi. And he says, Mr. Miyagi, can you please teach me karate? I want to learn to defend myself. And Mr. Miyagi thinks about it, and he says, okay, Daniel, I will. Come back tomorrow, come to my house, and I'll start teaching you karate. So Daniel shows up the next day, and Mr. Miyagi says, please sand my deck. He has a big deck going around his house, so Daniel gets down on his hands and knees and begins sanding this enormous deck for Mr. Miyagi. And he's sanding and sanding, and at the end, Mr. Miyagi says, good, come back tomorrow. So Daniel comes back the next day, and he sets about painting a fence. Mr. Miyagi says, paint the fence that goes all the way around my property. And Daniel is painting and painting this fence. And at the end of the day, Mr. Miyagi says, come back tomorrow. And of course, the famous Daniel is waxing on and waxing off this car. Mr. Miyagi has a dozen cars, and he tells Daniel, go wax all my cars. So at the end of this third day, Daniel's pretty frustrated. And he goes to Mr. Miyagi, and he says, you know, I asked you for help with learning karate. I wanted to learn how to do karate, and instead you just have me doing all your household chores. I'm sanding floors, I'm painting fences, and I'm waxing cars. You haven't taught me anything about karate. And of course, one of the most wonderful scenes in the movie is Mr. Miyagi says, yes, I have been teaching you karate the entire time. And Mr. Miyagi goes to strike Daniel, and Daniel does wax off and blocks his punch. So it turns out that the very basic fundamental motions of sanding floors and painting fences and waxing cars, those are the fundamental movements of karate. So Daniel didn't think he was learning anything about karate when in fact he was learning about karate all along. He just didn't realize it. That was sanding floors and waxing cars was transferable knowledge. It was transferable skill from one context to a very different context. Another person that talks about having a very full tool belt of skills is Kevin O'Leary. He's from Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, depending on where you are in the world. And he went to business school at the urging of his father-in-law. And when he finished business school, he says that the more skills I put in my toolbox, the greater my chances of success. It turned out that the things he learned in business school weren't just from class. It was about the people he met and the ways that he interacted with those people, and the things that he learned being in school but outside of class that he said were most beneficial to him going forward in his career as an entrepreneur. So he was increasing his toolbox. He was putting new tools in his tool belt and his toolbox and improving the tools that he already had. So again, I hope that you think about the different lengths and teeth in your comb, and think about the short teeth and how you can develop those to be longer. Maybe learn from yourself. Say, I know I have a long tooth over here. What about that tooth can help me develop and make this other shorter tooth longer? Or you can learn from others in seemingly unexpected ways. Back to the so what question. Why does this matter? Listen, identify who you are. Think about who you are right now, your as-is picture of yourself. What does your broken comb look like? Visualize it using these different models I've suggested, by classifying things according to attributes or knowledge or skills, or using a broken comb metaphor. Identify who you can be. Connect the dots. Think about things that strengths that you have right now and how those strengths can help you develop your weaknesses, and learn from others. Go find other people that have strengths that are your weaknesses and learn from them as well. So what? No, really, so what? So this is the section I've added to be more specific to testers. This is a Test Academy online, so I've added a little bit of content to make this more relevant and specific to testers. Let's talk about labels. Here are a handful of titles that I've encountered during my career. QA, QC, tester, analyst, engineer, architect, developer. Sometimes they have modifiers. I'm a software analyst, or I'm a lead engineer. Sometimes people distinguish between automated and manual. That's another talk for another day. Sometimes people are specialists where they focus on security or mobile or UI UX. And you can mix and match these various titles and modifiers and come up with big word salad type of titles like software development engineer and test and SDET. Now with any of these titles, I would suggest that they're trying to say something, but until you ask, you might not have the true meaning of what that title means. So anytime someone mentions their title, or you give your title to someone else, I would encourage you to dig deeper. Explain, what does that actually mean for you in your context? Or what does it mean? What does that title mean for that person? And also back to that Soren Kierkegaard quote, once you label me, you negate me. Most of us have titles at work. What does that title explicitly mean about what you do and what you can do at work? But also, what does it imply about what you don't do? Does it imply things that might not necessarily be true? As a tester, your title may make you feel anxious about offering help in areas that are outside of your testing or your title. You may feel anxious to go and help sit in a BA requirements elicitation or analysis meeting because, after all, you're just a junior tester. Or you may feel anxiety about going to sit in a code review because you're just a manager, of a QA manager. How could you possibly help? My title has nothing to do with that. I would encourage you to look beyond your title and understand that you probably have some skills, attributes, and knowledge that are transferable, and you can probably find value and provide value in ways that you don't expect. Also, understanding someone beyond their title, beyond what they do, can help you with your teamwork, help build relationships. Of course, if you meet someone at work, you might know their name and their title, but that doesn't tell you much about them. It tells you what they do, perhaps, but it doesn't tell you much about who they are. So if you really want to develop your teamwork and build relationships with your coworkers, find out more about who they are and do the same in return. Let them know something about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your different attributes, knowledge, and skills that you have, and that may help them better understand you and figure out how you can better be used more completely at your place of work. Talk a little bit about the different attributes, knowledge, and skills. This is just the tip of the iceberg, a very non-exhaustive list of some of the attributes I think are very essential for being a good tester. I think good testers are curious, they're empathetic, they're motivated, ethical, honest, brave, tactful. Sometimes you have to bring seemingly bad news to different people if you're reporting a bug, so tact is an important thing. Flexible, responsible. Sometimes these things contradict. You have to be self-reliant, be able to do things on your own. At the same time, cooperate, do things with other team members. So think about all the different attributes you are. And if you don't think they're important, I encourage you to still write it down because it might turn out to be important in ways that you don't expect. Here's some things that I think are important. Knowledge, when you're considering the testing context. I subdivide knowledge into several different areas. First is fundamental. The first piece of knowledge I think is important is to understand the idea of knowledge itself. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, understanding what distinguishes a belief from opinion, a fact from a judgment. And the understanding that there's different types of knowledge: explicit, implicit, and tacit. Michael Polanyi, an old economist and philosopher, came up with these different types of knowledge. Explicit is any type of knowledge that can be codified. Implicit is something that could be codified but has not been. And tacit knowledge is very interesting. It's type of knowledge that maybe cannot be expressed with words. Ineffable, the name of my company, is another word, a synonym for tacit. Trying to describe the beauty of a sunset or the vastness of space. These are tacit ideas that are very difficult to describe with words. Understanding those concepts, I think, is essential to becoming a good tester. Next, in linguistics and semantics, understanding language and how it relates to communication. Part of being a tester is not just gathering information, but providing information. So understanding language that we use and the words and how those words relate to meaning is very important, fundamental knowledge. Modeling, understanding how we visually and mentally model things in our minds, and what are the advantages and disadvantages, what are the risks and dangers of models, how can they benefit us. The ideas of relativism and perspectivism, understanding that quality and bugs are very subjective, they're not objective. Quality is value to someone at some time. Same thing as a bug is something that bugs someone at some time. Understanding that those ideas come from much more fundamental ideas of relativism and trade-offs, understanding sometimes to get one thing you have to sacrifice another. This is fundamental knowledge that can help you become a better tester. Another types of knowledge are technology, understanding the different technologies that are used in your particular workplace or your context. What are the different languages and tool stacks that you use? There's related knowledge. Maybe it's important to understand different methodologies. How do you make software in your shop? Is it waterfall? Is it agile? Is it some hybrid way that you make things? What are the approaches and methods and processes that you use? Having some big business acumen can help you as a tester. If you know a little bit about how to do a cost-benefit analysis or how to calculate ROI, understand trade-offs, that can help you be a better tester because you can start to look into PM considerations, the iron triangle of cost, quality, and time, and being able to do risk analysis. These are important related types of knowledge that can still help you be a better tester. Of course, there's testing knowledge, all the different terms and definitions, and then methodologies, different ways and approaches to test, context-driven, factory, risk-based, session-based, pairing, mobbing, and the different quality attributes, all the different abilities, functionality, testability, reliability, maintainability, portability. There's dozens of these things. If you don't know them, look them up and learn these different things because this is testing knowledge that can benefit you as a tester. The different techniques, A/B testing, boundary, unit, regression, white box, black box, all these different types and techniques that we use to test, and the different tools. There's way too many to mention. The more you know, the better tester you will be, depending on your context. And finally, dependent knowledge. If you are going to be a tester at a bank, perhaps some financial knowledge might benefit you. If you're going to be a tester in insurance, maybe finance knowledge isn't necessary, but insurance knowledge is. So there might be dependent knowledge that's dependent upon the domain that you're going to be testing in. Finally, the skills. These are things that you do. And again, these are things that might just be applied attributes or applied knowledge. But a few that I think are important to being a tester is communication. You need to have that as a well-developed skill. Again, it's not just about gathering information, but it's about providing it to others. Listening is terribly important. Listening to developers, listening to your coworkers, listening to the customers, all the different customers and stakeholders that we serve. Questioning, obviously a very important thing to being a tester. Questioning, challenging, being a skeptic. Documentation, analysis, abstract and critical thinking. Being able to think abstractly, again, visually model things, and being able to problem solve and think critically as you work your way through different problems as a tester. Negotiation, sometimes understanding that there are trade-offs and you may have to let one bug go because there's a greater value and for some other reason. So these are just a few of the things that I think are specific towards testers and can help you become less frustrated at work. If you start to recognize that you have a short tooth in one of these areas, you can start to develop it and make it stronger and longer to become a much better tester and hopefully decrease your frustration. So finally, back to labels. Again, most often these are filled out with your name, your title, and your company, but I would encourage you, next time you get a label, think about marking down an attribute or a knowledge or a skill. Think about something that you are, something that you know, something that you can do. And think about introducing yourself to someone as that. You can say your name and your title, but also offer something about who you are rather than just what you do. The summary slide, consider your labels. Think about the labels that you put on yourself and that you put on others. What do they explicitly give while they may implicitly take? Don't forget that anxiety is all about uncertainty. Confront anxiety. It's also about desire. So go towards it. The bad thing may not happen after all. Remember, it's never too late, but don't wait. You can relabel yourself at any point in your life and find out what areas you can grow and develop. Identify who you are right now. Visualize it with attributes, knowledge, and skills. Think about who you are, what your broken comb looks like, and then identify who you can be. Connect the dots between things you know in the past, things you do in the past, and things you might do in the future, and think, what is it about being a father that can help me be a better tester? What is it about being a tester that can help me be more curious? Connect the dots and learn from yourself and from others. So unjust yourself, rediscover who you are. Remember, you are more than that. And I am Damian Synadinos, a speaker with Ineffable Solutions. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I think I will meet most of you in the Slack channel for some Q&A very shortly.
That is correct. So the conversation will continue in Slack. You all have it. Oops, sorry. You all have it in the invite that Anna had sent over. And thank you very much, Damian, for your amazing webinar.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks.